The speed builds that you've seen up to this point were mostly gloomy and dark and very goth and full of dungeons. Let's turn it around and let's build something totally different today. This was my main idea behind this build. We are building today an enchanted forest, an overgrown forest, or whatever you like to call it. Basically, this will be full of huge shrooms and trees and colorful things, a place where dinosaurs nest, and so on and so on. I'm using the basic skills and basic tools that you already know from me. So using some tile noises. This I think was 5 layers of different types of grass. Mostly I'll be using Forgotten Adventures for this set, as they have the most robust set of giant shrooms that I really need for this specific build. Now this is also a huge map. This is 1,000 feet square. So so you basically have a whole dungeon or packed into one singular map. What is also going to be interesting in this map is that it's out in the open, so you don't have only rooms and only catacombs and things like that will lead you towards one point. You have an open space basically, which proved to be a rather big problem for me. The idea for this build was also to have some additional potential terrain, and I'm gonna be honest to you, this map was basically built from the base of a running joke in one of the Discord channels that I'm part of. In that Discord channel, we have one DM. The players of that DM, although tipped several times by the DM, figured that they will be facing a dinosaur, not dragon. And mind you, that was a game of Dungeons and Dragons. So although there were signals and signs of huge scratch marks and some scaly creatures looming in the dark and so on, the players were heavily convinced that they will be fighting a Tyrannosaurus Rex instead of a dragon. So I decided to build a map that will be looking exactly like a map where you could find a giant dinosaur. Now what I also wanted to do, and why I'm talking about this right now, is I wanted to give potential DM and maybe me in the future also to use this map for different things, including encounters with some kind of sea creatures or basically aqua creatures or underwater creatures. So I built also a huge pond in the middle of this. I will be adding a waterfall and so on in a minute or two. Now this also proved quite problematic, as you can imagine, while working with tile noise, you will always get these parts that are more blank or are missing the color space. And when you're working on a huge tiled noise asset, the chance that you will bump into that blank space on the edge of the tile is rather big, and that's going to be a problem when you're going to try to blend it. Also, what I didn't want the whole map to look like a forest and that's it. Because if I would be building a forest, that would take around 5 minutes in Arkenforge, not more. Basically, building a forest is nothing more than just picking the assets of trees that you need and adding them to your object brush and just brushing it all over the place. And I will use that technique in a minute or two over here also. So there's nothing as easy as that. So I didn't want that, and I wanted to have some interesting stuff going on the map. So hey, you have the pond over here, or the little lake. We're gonna have a small waterfall in a minute or two. We will also have a big cave or a giant of some sorts, with a cage inside, with a club and some fireplace stuff going on. There's also going to be a second system of something like caverns, which are infested by some sorts of spiders or something like that. And in the middle, I left a place where you could have a nest of a dinosaur, because mind you, this is supposed to be a dinosaur map. And even if you don't see it right now, you will notice when I start putting down the fungal and plant assets down, and making them oversized, how it will look like. Right now I'm focusing on the cave on the right side. Basically, I'm not even focusing on making it ready. I'm more experimenting with assets. And as you might have noticed, up to this point, I basically don't have not much things going on the map itself. As with the dungeon maps, setting out the basics is the most hard thing for me, or one of the longest things that takes the longest time. And if done right, well, the decoration is easy. If not done right, you're gonna have to make a lot of corrections and correct your mistakes during later phases. And actually, this was one of these maps that I did have to use a lot of I had to use a lot of patience, and I had to fix a lot of things down the line, because I just screwed up a lot of things that I could have omitted if I would have some specific plan in mind. So yeah, I figured that most of the caves over here will be covered in fungus or fungi, or however you should call that, because that is the main theme of this map. So I'm starting to focus on that. Later on during the build, I also changed the floor over here, and this is one of the mistakes that I've been talking about before a second. If I would change the floor in the beginning, I could add the fungi in specific color patterns that would suit this type of interior. I find that it's always important to think about such things. If colors match or things like that, that's simply something that makes your maps look a little bit better. It's not necessary, but it makes the maps look better. Also, this part of the map, the back side of the map, it won't be used in any way or sorts, but I figured that I want it to look good so, because basically for me as a DM, this is important that my maps look good also on my side, not only on the player side, also on my side. I don't want to be focusing on some awful, horrendously looking parts of maps that look like just the author of them didn't want to finish them at all. Okay, so we're doing the waterfall over here. I changed the opacity a little bit to make the flow of water less dominant, although during the export I exported it as a JPEG, so there's the waterfall wouldn't be visible, but still, even if static, the waterfalls look good. And that's a really decent asset. I think it's in the basics of the essentials, fantasy essentials. Not sure about that, but I think that's how it works. And I added some more waves, just rotated the asset over here, make it, it went all the way down basically, but still, this is one of these things. I want it to look good, even if it's going to be static later on. I want the waves to be static, but I want waves over there. I want to have these waves. I am I'm a strong supporter of the belief that these little details make maps worth their while, and these little details distinguish a quickly made map from a good made map. So I'm not saying that this map is the best. Actually, there's a lot of things that in hindsight I would change. So for example, I'm not even talking about things that I just done wrongly, and this is one of the great examples. I put down the assets and just deleted them because they didn't fit after all. That's just a mistake on my side. But for example, I didn't use shadow assets over here almost at all. I think the map would look much better, but it would be a lot of work to do that. And since this is, as mentioned earlier, meme map, map that is based on a joke. By the way, if you're one of the players, I applaud you. I heard that you were trolling your DM all the way. If that's true, I mean, that's that's amazing. That's really great. Okay, so this is another thing that I did. I put down the big stones or the boulders, and they were serving basically as points of interest in or points of orientation while using or building the rest of the map. So the density of the brush that I used was slightly too high, and as you can see, this is becoming slightly cluttered. And I think I will delete these shrooms in a minute or two when I see it. Yeah, exactly. Half of that what I used would be okay, especially that this is not a mushroom forest per se. This is a forest with overgrown plants. I'm not using any trees over here because the trees would be eradicated by other plants type creatures in this map. But yeah, the idea was that there are plants still here, not only mushrooms. I could do a mushroom forest map. I could do a mushroom map, especially since especially lately, Feywild is very popular, and that would probably fit. But yeah, this is not it. And still, again, you don't even see the second cavern that I mentioned that will be over here in a minute or two. I think that I figured it out only after putting the middle nest, actually. Trying to make the shrooms a little bit more spread out. I'm also picking up specific shrooms, the ones that you noticed probably that I just put on the boulders. They have a perspective on them, so they look like they're leaning or something, or growing on something actually, which I find very suitable over here. And at this point I decided that the lake will actually be something like a border, or will divide this portion of the map with a potential further part of the map. I didn't build the further part of the map, that's up to the DM to have fun with it, but yeah, I decided that the lake should be bigger. I will build something like stones through which you can jump over on this map later on, but you'll see that in a minute or two. And as with such mistakes, and as usually, you see that I made a lot of mistakes, and I'm fixing them with an overabundance of brush tool. If you watched my tip series, you will know that I'm not the biggest fan of the brush tool, especially since I learned from Nathan that the brush tool is quite heavy on your computer. And in fact, in a few moments during this build, I did have some problems with the stability of Arkenforge. It lagged a little bit in a few moments. You won't see it probably during the speed build because it's fast forward over here, but it did happen. Now, this is one of the things that I absolutely love doing. This is copy pasting sets of assets to make my life easier. Basically, you just mash up the same assets, but you mash them up in different places. So you copy a huge pile of boulders and you just move them around, and you get a different patterns of them. And this over here is basically a ready cavern that is built from scraps from the waterfall part of the map. So I didn't use even half of the time that I needed to build that part over here, because I just copy paste. And these are the same assets, so they don't load longer during the loading of the map, because they are readily available on load. Once they load, only the first part loads. So yeah, that's it makes things easier and faster. And also, I did copy more shrooms over here, just to make, again, stuff a little bit more interesting. And right now I'm starting to think that maybe I should be doing something with the floor over here. This is not yet it, I believe. Should be much darker. But again, using the same techniques of copy pasting until it works in a way. And I'm quite satisfied with it. For the floors, lately I've been using more Mike Schley's assets. Again, if you watched any of my earlier videos, you will know that I'm a huge Mike Schley fanboy. And his assets really go nice and tie in nice with the ones from Forgotten Adventures. Not to say that the Arkenforge assets don't. Some of them do. I would say most of them don't, but some of them do. And speaking of Arkenforge assets, you saw me build several maps. Well, maybe not several, but you could have seen several of my videos where I used different assets to build different things. Mostly those things were fantasy, but I am also the owner of the space and post-apocalyptic assets that are in Arkenforge, so the sci-fi assets, and I do use them from time to time. And this is one of the maps that I will use a sci-fi asset. For example, the xenobiology plants that are present in those sets fit basically just like a glove on this map. They look really good. The thing I'm building right now is the nest of the huge dinosaur that you might meet. So this is basically the Tyrannosaurus Rex nest. I have no idea Tyrannosaurus Rexes nested like this. That's please don't don't spam the comment section with that's not how dinosaurs work. Please remember this is a fantasy game. So yeah, I did build more plants, and I didn't use the brush tool right now because I already see where the mushrooms are. I know where the blanks are. It would probably be less problematic to do it like this. And by the way, there's a new function that didn't exist when I was creating the tips and tricks series. It's an option to scale objects not only in accordance to their relative position, but also to their absolute position. So you can scale objects in 2 different ways, which is absolutely marvelous and great, and this is the best ever. And thanks team for doing that. I missed that function a lot, and I know that it was a lot of work to do that. So yeah, thanks a lot for that. The forest is starting slowly to look good. It's still not it, and actually up until the last minutes you won't see the final form of the forest, because only in the end I started to make some like pathways or places where I started to clean up the place, let's say, so that it's not pure chaos. There are some pathways and some places that you can traverse the player. You did see before a second that I thought about using a tree asset over here, and I decided against that. Trees, typical leafy trees, and an overgrown forest would probably have to be extremely huge. I would probably have to use the stump assets, so only you would see the stump of the tree, because the crown of the tree itself would be too big. That's not something I fancy, to be honest. I don't like the stump assets. I don't think they look good. I know this is a game of imagination, but still, aesthetically they are not pleasing for me, sadly. Cliff assets for creating an illusion of depth. I could have used additional shadows over here. I didn't do that. As mentioned, this is not the perfect map, and this is not my proudest build, but it's a fun one, and it's a colorful one, and I imagine a lot of DMs could have a lot of fun over here, especially if you're playing, for example, D&D and you have a Doom of Annihilation vibe going on. This is basically built for you. So yeah, some blood assets, changing the opacity just to make them slightly less visible, and this is one of the things that I really liked about this map. I created a whole set of skeletons that are also kind of like giant skeletons, so they are at least 20 feet, for example, high. They are barely visible over there, but they are visible, which makes the map more interesting, in my opinion. It gives the potential players to stumble upon this nest a moment of thought: what happened here and who lived here, what type of creatures had to dwell before them. Now building the nest, the basic nest. I did choose to use a nest without eggs over there. I did choose to use a nest with eggs on the top of the map, or potential pterodactyls or other flying dinosaurs if you would like to use them. This one over here can be empty, or you could just add your own egg asset over there to make it look good. And again, copy paste is my best friend, so I copied some shrooms and adding them to the cliffs over here. Nothing as easy as that. On zoomed, this map looks, in my opinion, much better than zoomed out. When you zoom out, it looks very colorful and very it looks nice, but it's not exactly what I would say looks the best. If you check out, if you imagine the players being 5 feet square, so just one tiny square over here, it somehow moves my imagination slightly more than the zoomed out map, so it gives them more of a feeling that you are actually surrounded by humongous trees and shrooms and so on and so on. And when I later add the desired amount of other assets, like for example the aforementioned shrooms, you will also see that it's slightly better. Now, I mentioned that I did want to build something like a passageway to the other side. Sorry, it's midnight over here. And I did it by using rocks, although not the rocks that you see over here right now. It's yeah, it's a work in progress still. Just to leave some basic sign of human culture. I did leave that one solar clock or solar symbol or some ancient type of symbol on the outside cavern. And on the inside cavern, in the last part of the cavern, I will add some gems or crystals that could be, it could be many different things actually, whatever the DM decides. I tried to do something with the floor over here, and this is an absolutely beautiful asset. This is the texture of space, but it was a little bit too much over here, a little bit too colorful and too screaming. So I delayed it. I did, however, figure that this is an amazing place for spiders to live. So the whole cavern on the left side of the map is covered with spider webs, cobwebs, and I will also add some spider eggs in one of the nooks of this cavern, and I use a lot of webs over here. Sometimes changing also the opacity so it's not as visible as it was, mainly because when it's too much, when you use a lot of webs, it starts to look maybe not cluttered, but it loses the feeling of being almost weightless like spider webs are. Like, look at this web over here. This is something that works because it's barely visible, and you don't see it on a zoomed out map. But when you zoom in and when you imagine you are over there and you're walking, and these singular strands of webs, and this is what works actually. If you ask me, this is what works good for the map. Problems with these types of assets are always the same. It's hard to grab the asset itself because of it's mostly transparent, so it's really hard to grab it because you have to grab the part that is visible. So if you have just a strand, you have to grab exactly the strand to move the asset around. So that's somewhat problematic. Often, not always, but often. Yeah. So still, each time I zoom out, I see that there's something missing still on this forest. The forest should be the same moment dense and as a traversable entity, it also should be well, exactly, traversable. So you don't want to clutter it, and you in the same moment don't want it to be sparse. You don't want it to look like just a few trees here and there, because that doesn't work. Oh, over here you see the alien bushes and alien trees that are from the Arkenforge assets, from the sci-fi assets. I think they work really great over here. They are the best over here, actually. Bushes are in, and now I'm setting up trees which are slightly more vibrant, even, I'd say. Especially one type of tree or bush, I'm not sure, has this specific type of like roots or something that could look like a poisonous or dangerous type of plant. And this, I'm starting to achieve the point of saturation of with plants that I was aiming for from the beginning. And this is what I mean when I say that mostly Arkenforge assets don't fit into Forgotten Adventures assets, but when they do, I mean, they tie the place together like the rug in Lebowski. They are exactly what I needed over here, and thanks to them, I started to see potential pathways over here and potential things that I should or could do, and I started to see some potential plots for this map. So I started to envision that the players would enter this place from the right lower corner of the map, and then they would have a couple of choices where to go, and they could meet either the giant, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, the ancient clock, or they could just slip by the side and choose to enter the spider's cave, or go straight forward to the lake and maybe meet the aquanaut monster over there. Oh, did you notice that one? That was exactly the tree with the roots that looks like some kind of carnivorous tree. Okay, so think one of the things that I remembered or reminded myself in this moment was that I forgot about the cavern on the right side. It's there, but there's basically nothing interesting inside. So in a minute or two of time, you will see me making work also in that part. Now, since I already have some interesting pathways over here, I'm just basically decorating to make things from time to time look a little bit different. It's also something that I usually do, so add an asset or two assets that are different than other assets here and there. It gives also some freedom to the DM. Now I'm doing something that again, I should have thought about it a little bit earlier. I'm adding waves to the water. Now I could do it in a different way, but the waves with the rocks that come in the Forgotten Adventures assets, they fit amazingly well over here. Look at how it looks like. If you just go a little bit darker, it also fits with other rocks, and again, this makes the water feel slightly more alive, as it should be. You can already see the passages over here, and now the passage through the lake, and we are nearing the end of this map. I didn't want to make them just like a ladder almost, so I chose to put them slightly away from slightly off from each other, let's say. And the right hand side map, cavern, 2 logs on which a giant could sit. Each of them is like 20 feet long, or maybe longer. Huge campfire in the middle, some cages. I did miss a round wooden cage. I don't have such an asset over here, sadly, but I felt that would fit really nicely into that corner that I chose for the chains, but I didn't have that, sadly, so yeah, I had to use this what I have. A club, so the giant should be probably like 20 feet or higher. Some huge sacks. Everything is overgrown, basically. Everything is oversized in this map, so it's the same for the giant cave, except for the cages, which are more human or animal in size. Now, this is not yet it. This is not a finished product yet. Still, there needs to be some smaller or bigger stuff added to this part of the cavern for it to work as it should. So just some basic clutter, basically. A kettle here, on something like a table there, a cleaver, things that just make the cavern slightly more alive. And I wanted to get this vibe of a giant from a fairy tale that just cooks their meals before killing the victims that are in the cages. This is something that I think fits nice into the dinosaur theme over here. Just some additional clutter here and there. They don't have any uses, even in my mind. They are just fillers of space, and this looks already okay, if you ask me. This is something that would pass in my school of mapping. For more cautious travelers, adding a pile of skulls, so there's a chance to spot that there's something very dangerous over here before entering the cave. That is something that's probably obvious for most players, but yeah, at least it should be. So yeah, that's it. This is the magical overgrown forest map that I built today. There was a fun map. As you've seen, I needed around 3 hours for it, but still, it was super fun to build it, and it was something different. I think I might try building some different types of maps in the future, not only dungeons. Dungeons are easy, are needed, are basic, but still there's much more to be explored in map making. If you have any suggestions of what I could or should build, please leave me a comment, and thanks for watching. Hope to see you around. Be sure to check the other videos that I upload, and I will see you around. Bye.